Hi everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I am the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California, and welcome to today's special 10th anniversary episode. That's right, 10 years ago on the 26th of January, 2010, me and, at the time, my writing partner, we started this podcast together because we had no idea how to do anything in show business, how someone starts in show business, how someone has a long-lasting career, a sustainable career. And after about a year and a half, we had the answers to that, by the way, which are don't be an asshole, work hard, network, that is, network non-cynically, and that you should meet up with people whose company you actually enjoy and don't be a psychopath. Don't just meet with people because you think they can do something for your career. I mean, since moving to Los Angeles in the middle of 2017, I have some other thoughts on it, but basically after we kind of had the answers for how do you have a career in this business, the show kind of mutated. Mark, my former writing partner, eventually left to go do his own thing, and I ended up I really enjoy having these conversations. This is the one thing in my professional career that I do that has no monetary value attached to it. I have not, I don't sell ads, I don't make merchandise for it, though I think the design for the logo would make a cool t-shirt. But it's the one non-commodified thing I do, and I really enjoy having these conversations with people about their childhood and learning usually new things about people and how that connects to the art they make. Today is no different. Today, for this special 10th anniversary episode, I talked to Stephin Merritt. If, by some strange reason, you don't know who that is, why don't I read you his bio right now. Stephin is the founder and primary songwriter behind the band The Magnetic Fields. Started in 1991 in Boston, the band has released 11 albums, including the 3-volume 69 Love Songs and his most recent 5-LP album, 50-song memoir. In addition to The Magnetic Fields, Stephin also performs in The Sixths, The Gothic Archies, and Future Bible Heroes. He has scored a number of films and TV shows, and he has collaborated on a number of musical theater productions. In high school, I saw Superchunk at Lollapalooza, and I love them. So I went to a little record seller there. It might have been like a merge little record store at Lollapalooza under a little tent. And I got Incidental Music, which had their cover of 100,000 Fireflies. And I love that so much that I went to the CD store, which is how old I am. I went to the CD store and I said, hey, there's this band that Superchunk covered, apparently. Again, this is before the internet, so I looked on the sleeve notes, saw it was a Magnetic Field song, and had the CD store just blindly, I couldn't hear them, I just had them blindly order me an album, which was The Charm of the Highway Strip. Totally blew my mind. I've been a big fan ever since, and so when I was looking around for someone I could talk to on the special 10th anniversary show, I like to talk to people who have been important to me on these anniversary episodes. I talked to Chris Claremont from, he basically revolutionized the X-Men, created some of the characters I love a ton. I talked to him on episode 300. I talked to Scott Thompson from The Kids in the Hall, which was a foundational comedy experience to me. I talked to him on the 400th episode, now 10th anniversary. Stephin Merritt. And we got into some very cool, interesting stuff about his childhood that I really didn't know before. I will say this, it was a little bit difficult, because I think Stephin was kind of questioning the premise of the show. What it is to understand someone or understand who a person is at any age. I think he was not entirely on board with that idea that you could understand someone. And I think it's wrapped up in some things I'm being very vague because I don't want to spoil anything in the interview, but I think it's wrapped up in some stuff that he dealt with his mother, which you'll hear in the interview. But I thought it actually seemed to be very appropriate for the 10th anniversary episode that I am kind of justifying what my thoughts are on the process of interviewing someone about their childhood with the intent of trying to understand how the art they make came out of that. You know, I don't ever like to connect the dots exactly on this show. I like to have all the pieces there, and when you listen, you can kind of put it together yourself or think about it. And I think a lot of that stuff here is present in a very amorphous way, where afterwards I was like, oh yeah, Stephin's music makes a lot more sense now. I hope you feel the same. Anyway, if this is your first time listening to the show, thank you so much for checking it out. If you want to check out other episodes, they're all there on Spotify. If you want to download them, they're at beginnings.libsyn.com. And what I like to do here in the beginning of every episode is maybe suggest some guests you might like based on the guest that I'm talking to in this episode. Stephin is a indie rock musician. What about some other indie rock musicians I've had on the show? Such as, Spiral Stairs from Pavement. I've talked to Mitski. I've talked to Dean Wareham of Luna and Galaxy 500. Anna Waronker of That Dog. Colin Newman from Wire. And tons of other people, especially since I moved out to Los Angeles. I've been talking to more and more musicians. But what about not musicians? What about some other big episodes? Some interesting people I've talked to. Damon Lindelof, creator of Lost and Watchmen and The Leftovers. Abby and Alana have been on the show from Broad City before. Sashir Zameda from SNL. And literally hundreds of other writers and actors and comedians and artists. So check out those episodes. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Play, and probably a ton of other places. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Andy Beckerman. Even though Twitter's a nightmare, I try to just write silly jokes still, pretending like it's 2009. And I think that's about it. So thank you so much for listening. And without any further ado, live to tape from his apartment in Manhattan, here is my talk with Stephin Merritt. But I got, on the plane ride here, I got barotrauma in this ear. I'm not trying to pronounce it, but basically this ear is filled up with, behind the eardrum is filled up with liquid. So everything sounds a little duller. Uh-oh. And I'm hoping it clears up before we fly back.
Yeah, I went to San Diego once for a week, and the entire time one of my ears never popped from the flight. And then I took a flight back, and on the way down, my ear popped.
Oh, okay.
Still, yeah, you could go to the ear doctor and get it syringed.
My insurance is not great. I'm like, oh, maybe this will just sort itself out.
It might.
I had to go to get my yearly melanoma check yesterday, and I'm just like, well, you're a doctor. Let me ask you just a general medical question. And she said to take Sudafed, and that should dry out the liquid. So my ears aren't that, they're not that, that's not true. I was about to say they're not that sensitive, but actually it's more that I just live my life mostly in my head. Mm-hmm. So if I concentrate, then my hearing's great. But mostly I'm just like playing around in my brain.
Right.
And so the world kind of just like whooshes past, like you're in a car or something.
Oh dear.
Can I say we're here in your apartment with your two lovely dogs, and just to set the scene,
Edgar and Agatha.
Oh my God, they are just the best.
Thank you.
And how are you feeling today? I like to try to get a baseline, just to see where we both are.
So I'm hopped up on allergy medicine so that I can clean my apartment, which is a terrible, chaotic mess at the moment because I moved recently, and I was playing 4 different shows at Symphony Space in November and December, so I had never actually had time to unpack.
Yeah.
So now I'm unpacking things that are by now dusty, and I need the allergy medication to avoid coughing all over your microphone.
First of all, this is not, I will say this for the listener, that this is not that messy at all. My wife, when we moved to Los Angeles, there was a box of her stuff that I put on her desk in the office, and when we moved apartments, because the first one was filled with ants and termites and stuff, that box was still unpacked, and we just moved it, and it still sits on her desk. We moved in April, unpacked.
Was it shrink wrapped?
No, it's just sitting there.
You should put it outside until it's.
She could easily.
Easily have moved some ants and termites with you.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about that.
Now you do.
Oh great! Now until we get back to Los Angeles, I'm gonna be sweating.
Couldn't you have your dog sitter put it outside?
We brought our dog with us, but we do have a cat sitter. I don't know why I had to be very specific about that. Yes, we could ask our cat sitter too.
Yes.
I'm in a weird space too. I just got through 4 days of family trauma.
Oh.
Dealing with
sorry,
her parents. And then we had a dinner last night with my parents and her parents and us. And it was just a little bit of an emotional onslaught. So I'm coming back down from that. Is it just the allergy medicine? Are you in general a kind of low-key person?
Oh, I'm an extremely low-key person. If I get in a car accident or near car accident, my heart is beating normally in 2 or 3 seconds.
Is it just
I just basically don't have any adrenal response whatsoever.
So is it just a quirk of physiology?
I don't know. I have many quirks of physiology, and some of them are probably related to each other.
Mm-hmm. Because I was like, either that or you're just like a very calm person. I've read a little bit about your childhood, but I don't.
An intensely calm person.
Have you? What is there anything that like gets a rise out of you, or is it all just kind of like on the level? I know that's not what that phrase means, but
I like farcical plays. I will giggle uncontrollably at noises off.
Yeah.
Or one servant, 2 masters.
So humor is the one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I was ever
humor and music, I guess.
Yeah. I was never like a calm person, but I was definitely a repressed person before I went to therapy. And now all the emotions and things are coming back out again, and I'm trying to figure out how to control them. Not that's a bad way of putting it, but how to like I
don't know,
master them.
You should be able to control your emotions.
Oh yeah, I'm an adult. That's why I'm like that's a bad way of phrasing this. I am an adult. I can control my emotions.
Yeah, you can control them without repressing them. Sure.
Yeah. I think I'm learning how the nuances. How's that? I think that's probably a better way of phrasing it.
Nuance is good.
So the little bit I read about your childhood was that you moved around a lot and that your mom was an English teacher.
She was an English teacher for part of that, yeah.
For part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of how accurate biography it was for the album you did that was your memoir. But were you born in St. Thomas?
No, I was conceived in St. Thomas.
Conceived in St. Thomas.
Born in Yonkers Hospital, 2 blocks from the Bronx.
What led your mom from St. Thomas to Yonkers?
I have really no idea of my mother's motivations for most of her actions taken during my childhood, and every time I ask her, the motivation is different, so I no longer ask her.
Yeah. Is she...
I know why we moved to Boston, which is that her guru told her to. That is the only one where I actually know why we moved from place to place.
Yeah.
But we lived I lived in 33 places in my first 22 years.
Yeah. I'm really fascinated by. I also read that she was. You called her a seeker. There's something about the boomer generation.
I didn't call her a seeker. Someone must have summarized.
Someone must have summarized.
Take on her as a seeker.
There's something about the boomer generation that in the 60s, and there's so many people that I talked to on the show whose parents they went to communes and ashrams, and some of them grew up in cults like the Moonies. And there's something...
Yeah, I grew up partly in a cult.
Like the Moonies, or...
Not completely unlike the Moonies. This was called Vajradhatu, part of Tibetan Buddhism, run by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, the author of Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. Ironically, it was very packed with spiritual materialism, and they actually had a navy with reportedly a weapons stockpile. The guru after Trungpa was credibly accused of infecting a number of his flock with HIV because, gurus fuck like bunnies.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say fuck on your podcast?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Okay.
So, okay, wait, sorry. How long were you and your mom, or how long was your mom in this? Can I say cult?
You can say religion.
Religion?
She wouldn't call it a cult. I would.
Okay.
Decades. I can't really quantify it because she's never quite left it. But since 1974.
Huh.
Or so.
Because there's like, obviously to me, the tip over between like you calling it a cult, her calling it religion is probably the weapons stockpile, at least in my head, like a branch like the kind of dividing line.
Oh, not keeping people up all night? That wouldn't do it?
I mean, yes.
Okay, because keeping people up all night is kind of one of the pointers to me too.
Mind control kind of things. Taking people's money.
Well, taking people's money is the essence of religion. That's why Taoism isn't a religion. Until they start taking people's money, and then it is.
Interesting. How does your mom get to St. Thomas in the first place? Like, what are her parents?
What the hell was my mother doing in St. Thomas? I don't know.
Like, do you know your grandparents? Do you have a relationship with them at all?
I've only met one of my grandparents.
So she's kind of just like...
She's dead now.
So your mom, you're just kind of like, that she's moving around a lot as a child. Mm-hmm. And you're just going with her. Is there a point where you start questioning that?
I don't remember ever not questioning it. Why are we doing this again? Was a common refrain.
Like, is this are you getting into a relationship with her where at some point, and I think of my wife's relationship with her mom a little bit, where you're parenting her, where you're the one who's like having these rational questions?
I'm an only child, so there's always that dynamic.
Yeah.
She's had various diagnoses that purport to explain her behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel comfortable in sharing them.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I would never push you. I mean, is there a place where you are living that you think where your personality started to form, or that informed who you became as a person?
Have you ever seen the 7-Up series of television documentaries?
No, I've just read about them.
I just saw 63 Up a few days ago. It's a very long-running series in which the filmmaker Michael Apted interviews a group of 7-year-olds and then re-interviews them every 7 years until recently 63 Up, which is the first one where one of them has died. Mm-hmm. And it seems unlikely that Michael Apted will make another one. So this may be the climax of documentary filmmaking. Basically, what could be more the essence of documentary filmmaking than interviewing the same people every 7 years? Yeah.
I mean, is that 7 years did he choose it because it's the kind of like theoretical or philosophical idea that like your body is your cells change enough over 7 years that they're completely new every 7 years, or was it just?
Well, no. The Jesuit, I think, Jesuit quote at the beginning is, "Give me a child of 7, and I will give you the man, or I will show you the man."
Yeah.
So you were asking about when my personality formed, and I just think my personality was pretty intact by the age of 7. I was writing songs by then.
Yeah.
Compulsively.
Did you ever have a time that, like, this is the thing that I found with myself, and this is, again, that I had to, like, kind of discover through therapy. It was that who I was at 7 is who I am now.
Yeah.
But I kind of paved over it. Or I had to excavate that person from parental expectations, from kind of societal expectations of what I was supposed to be. Like, if I hadn't done any of that stuff, I would be like a very unhappy doctor somewhere in the suburbs, married to a Jewish woman who was probably very nice, but I would probably be a person that sat in their study and just like thought about what could have been for the rest of my life. And so,
well,
who I was like,
we do need doctors.
Yeah.
Suburban lifestyle is probably not ultimately sustainable, but other than that, they need doctors in the suburbs too.
Sure. I'm sure I would have been. I did extremely well in school. I'm sure I would have been fine. I'm sure it would not have been a bad existence. I'm sure. Just
the part about sitting in your study with regrets.
Yeah, just a regretful and resentful one, probably at its core if I was examined. But who I was, like, an embryo.
Who could possibly not have regrets, though? I don't understand people who claim not to have regrets. I regret breakfast.
I think it's the size of the regrets. Like, if I had not said, well, I really want to do comedy, I really want to write. If I had not been honest with myself at some point and gone to do that, it would have been just a giant regret, I think, at the core of myself, deforming, like gravity, deforming the rest of my life around it, as opposed to like little minor regrets now, like I should have kissed this girl 20 years ago and I didn't. And it's just like, I have a wonderful wife now. It doesn't matter. Like I think it's the density instead of size. How about density of the regret? If the gravity is the metaphor.
Maybe regretting not having done something is better than regretting having done something.
Yeah.
A few days ago, I did something terribly embarrassing that I definitely won't share with you. That I have spent the last few days mortified with regret about, and I can't possibly take it back. But if you wish you kissed a particular girl, you can still do that. So the regret of lack of an action can usually be rectified. Yeah.
The ones you're talking about, though, are mostly the ones that are in my brain. The like, oh, I stuck my foot in my mouth, or oh, why did I do that? And those are the ones that a lot of times now it's just like a live performance that somehow went awry somewhere, and I'll wake up at 3 a.m. with anxiety about like, you should have just been bolder, and you would have carried that performance.
Yeah, you could wake up at 3 a.m. with anxiety, or you can wake up at 3 a.m. with heartburn. You're going to wake up at 3 a.m. either way.
Take
it from me.
The heartburn to me, though, the psychological ones are worse because
I think there's a difference.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I think you wake up at 3 a.m. because of some physical symptom, and you ascribe it to whatever you happen to be regretting.
But do you not? Like, my brain will clue me into whatever's there's some clarity, the kind of snap to awakeness at 3 a.m. that there's like a clarity in it where I know if it's physical, in which case I can go take an Advil or something and fall back to sleep. But if it's regret, if it's something deeper, then it's a very difficult process of either. And usually it's something I can't do anything about. So it's just a process of learning to live with whatever it is. And that's like, oh, I don't get back to sleep right away. And maybe I don't get to sleep well for the next week or so.
Yeah, that would be me. Right now. Yeah.
Yeah, see, yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from.
But, it's really heartburn. It's really just heartburn.
But, wait, where were we? Oh, your personality. Yes, no, look, I don't ascribe to a linear idea of personality. I don't think, like, X things happened in your childhood, and now, as an adult, you're like this. I think instead, you're kind of, who you are as a person is kind of, you can draw vectors, and you're buffeted around by different circumstances, and it pushes you a little bit in this direction, a little bit in this direction, and there's like a core. There's a lot of diagramming that I try to do in the air with this, but if it makes sense, there's like a core of who you are, maybe, and that's the thing that forms. And then how it's like,
how is that how is that idea disprovable?
The linearity versus the complexity?
No, there being a core of who you are. Is that statement actually meaningful?
That's a good question.
Is it refutable?
I think it's anecdotal, to be honest. I mean, most of the show, this is, it's been going for 10 years, and most of the show is just anecdotal about who we are as children and how that forms us and how the art that we make spills out of us in some way.
Well, the first thing you asked me about was, am I always this low key? Maybe if I were on a popular antidepressant like every single other person in my family, I would be bubbly. Although you probably wouldn't register me as bubbly because I have a voice 2 octaves too low and an unexpressive face. But maybe it would become more expressive if I were Prozac addled or something. So would that be changing the core of my personality if there is such a thing? Maybe. Because our personality is presumably all neurochemical, electrical.
I personally don't reduce it to just that. I think it is some kind of alchemy. I don't know what word to really use there, between your social, the different roles that you play in the social world and the neurochemical. And the same way that, like, I think the old understanding of like nature versus nurture is too linear and outdated, and it's really a very complex dialectic, something like that, between the two things that forms you as a person. And then it depends on like whether your personality calcifies at a certain point, or whether you're changed by certain circumstances. I mean,
my personality probably calcified around the age of 3 when I was medicated for epilepsy. Every time I had any excitement whatsoever, if I was experiencing any emotions whatsoever, basically, in order to ward off a seizure, they'd shove Dilantin down my throat.
So it kind
bad for your teeth, but great for your not having seizures. The more seizures you have, the more seizures you will have. So it's important to medicate.
Is that something that that is a lifelong problem, or was it a
Not
childhood
really.
thing?
I'm really bad with ceiling fans under lights. I can't believe that other people can actually be in a room with a ceiling fan under a light. But other than that, and strobe light sequences,
sure,
I'm pretty okay.
But
I don't fall over. I have friends who fall over. I haven't fallen over since the 80s.
But the medicine kind of like evened out your emotional spectrum a little bit.
Who knows?
As a guess, something like that.
Some people find that plausible, some don't. My current therapist thinks that's a ridiculous theory. My previous therapist thought it was obvious.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not a bad theory at all. I mean, that's what a lot of
therapists fail to achieve consensus on 9 out of 10 questions. Like everyone else.
Well, you grew up in a lot of different places. When did therapy become something you were willing to try? Because I grew up in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, and it was like therapy wasn't a real thing.
In school, they called it speech therapy. but it was therapy.
Yeah.
So I was put into therapy well before I was able to consent to it.
Do you find that as an adult, do you think that was a positive thing, or do you think it...
I don't know.
Because I find the kind of like existential issues that I face in therapy are things that I was dealing with in childhood anyway. Fear of death, fear of failure, I think are the two big ones in my brain, at least.
What I really gained from therapy in the last 20 years is that I managed to acquire adult skills that I did not at all get from my upbringing.
Yeah.
Like being able to boil water. I am not exaggerating.
Mm-hmm.
I was not allowed into the kitchen for most of my childhood. And I was not allowed into the kitchen for much of my adult life either, actually. I have a history of boyfriends who cook really well and don't want anyone else in the kitchen. And I don't know what attracts me to these people. I should just shoot them on sight. But as a result, my cooking skills have come entirely from my therapist. And when she retired, that was the end of my culinary journey. Now I have a new therapist, but it's not in his apartment, so we can't actually cook.
I found that
Come to think of it, he is down the block from here. He could come to my house and we could cook. But
Yeah, is there anything stopping that?
I don't know. He might have a rule against it.
Our couples therapist, I find we cross a lot more boundaries. We learn more about his life than I ever did with any of my personal therapists.
Yeah.
And in fact, my new therapist in Los Angeles, she doesn't want me to ask Eddie. I mean, I was just saying, like, I asked just like, oh, what are you doing for the holidays? And she's like, let's not talk about anything like that. I mean, was the cooking, do you think that was like a part of the therapy? Was it just a personal thing that you could do with your therapist? Like what?
No, it's definitely part of the therapy. My therapist would say, do you really have to eat out all the time? I'm like, yes, I really have to eat out all the time or starve. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to cook for myself. Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't have any pots, for example.
When you guys are moving around so much, is this because is the guru, besides Boston, you said the guru sent her to Boston, is she still, when does she enter this religion? Like before you were born?
That one, when I was 9, I think. We got back from Hawaii and went to Vermont, and she joined the Tibetan Buddhists.
So, okay. So by 7, you're already the kind of who you are. And then 9, and you enter this religion. And because I'm just trying to think about this
I don't think it's fair to say that I entered the religion because I was already a committed, skeptical, militant atheist by that point.
Really?
Yeah.
What? Well, I don't think I became an atheist probably until I don't think I was willing to admit it until I was in my later teens. I mean, how did you come to that conclusion already at 7 or 8 or 9?
The idea of God never made any sense to me. It seems internally contradictory. How could anyone be both omnipresent and omniscient and omnipotent? All three of those three qualities cannot be reconciled.
Mm-hmm. I was actually thinking about Descartes earlier today because I was thinking about how much of my life is, I don't know what verb I want, influenced, let's say, by radical doubt, where I think, like coming here today, I must have checked that I had the recording equipment minimum of 10 times. Mm-hmm. The idea that if I'm wrong about one thing, I could be wrong about everything is something that plagues me. It's the only... Sorry, when you started talking about atheism, I started thinking about his flawed, in Meditations, his kind of flawed argument for God and how that misses the boat, or not boat, how that misses the point of faith. And it's...
The point of faith has never been clear to me. I don't... it's bad enough without faith. I don't...
Yeah.
I mean, our claim to knowledge is bad enough without making stuff up.
I mean, that's the thing I've had to reckon with. I talk about this a lot on the show, that I've never had a feeling of faith.
And I had to, it is intriguing to me anytime I talk to someone who does have it. Because there's a difference, I think, between someone who just follows the rules of whatever the religion is that they are a part of and someone who actually feels faith. There's just nothing. When I try to feel it in my chest, there's nothing. I don't know what it, I felt it once in the tomb of St. Francis as a, like, I call it like a contact high faith. Like I could feel other people feeling it. And I was attuned to them.
I haven't even had that.
It's strange. It's a strange feeling.
I was at the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, and a woman asked me to take off my hat because I was in a sacred space. And I'm so proud of myself with my response. I said, fuck off.
That's the other thing that I found.
My ownership of that space is exactly equivalent to her ownership of that space.
Yeah.
I say it is not a sacred space. She says it is. I'm right. Even if I were not right, my claim to it is identical to hers.
Yeah. I mean, where did you get the confidence? I would have buckled because I would have kind of just been, I would have wanted her approval because I somehow need the approval of people, even if there's someone I don't like.
I don't want the approval of people who walk up to strangers in places they don't own and give them orders.
Yeah. But like, I mean, there's some very deep core of confidence to be able to do that. I think. I don't know how you feel.
Sure, I have a deep enough core of confidence that I imagine that people are going to want to listen to songs I write. That's a pretty confident thing to do.
Does that go all the way back to childhood? Have you always been that kind of confident person?
Sure. I mean, I was writing songs and playing them for others by 7. Yeah. I'm an only child. That's kind of built in for many of us.
Yeah. But I mean,
we don't have to compete.
I mean, did you have... I'm still trying to figure out what kind of relationship to have with my parents. When you're growing up and your mom is in this religion, do you spend a lot of time with her? Is there a lot of, like, do you feel like you grew up knowing her as a person?
Sure.
Did you come to that in adulthood later?
I knew her pretty well as a person from early on. She actually did change kind of radically. In the mid-'80s, we both had some kind of Epstein-Barr or something like chronic fatigue syndrome, something, where calendar year 1987, we were both essentially too exhausted to get up and down the stairs more than once a day. It was awful. And after that experience, her personality changed quite a lot. She remained a Tibetan Buddhist, but she was no longer like Daffy Duck, manic, like she had been all of my childhood. When I watch early Daffy Duck cartoons, I am reminded of my mother, which gives you some clue as to what some of her diagnoses may have been. But she changed what the DSM would have regarded as the main descriptive feature of her personality. Basically went away, which is great, I guess. My childhood would have been a whole lot easier if that change had been before I was born.
Right. So, you're in the 80s, you're in your teenager into your 20s, right?
I was born in 65, so 20 in 1985. So I was 22 when we had chronic fatigue, whatever it was.
I mean, does your relationship with her deepen through that then, as her kind of manicness fades?
Well, it does get easier for her to finish a sentence. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the thing I was talking about, where I was saying about like the kinds of things that buffet our personalities, where there is some kind of core, but sometimes there are these drastic near-death experiences, or just personality shifts that happen due to certain things that I don't know how drastic. I'm still trying to put the pieces together about really how to understand this stuff. I know it's dialectical in some way. In some way, who we are bounces, but there's like a core that bounces between different boundaries. not everyone. Again, it's also on a spectrum. Some people are just the boundary is so tight that the personality doesn't move.
And then they get brain cancer and it moves.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I'm skeptical of the idea of a core in a person's personality. Personality is hard enough to define in the first place without trying to both quantify it and say that it's unchangeable.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
of course it's changeable.
I feel
People undergo trauma that changes them.
Yeah.
People undergo neurological crises that change them.
Yeah. Like, I feel like it's some way, even though
if someone is asleep, do they have the same personality? We're asleep a third of our lives.
If you woke them up, then yes, I would say you don't have any personality probably while you're asleep. You are. That's the thing. I studied a lot of analytic philosophy, and I rejected it at some point because I think that there are other dimensions of how to understand someone. Like, the easy example is
always.
there was a class on identity, and it was only about numerical identity. Like, Locke has a thing, I think, where I think it's about like chopping off someone's hand. And if you chop off someone's hand, is it them? If it walks around, like, he basically invented like the Addams family or something like that. It's like walking around. And I'm just like,
is thing a person?
Yeah.
Does thing have personhood?
Yeah. And I found a lot of analytic philosophy to be just sci-fi kinds of things. Like, if you chop someone's brain in half, is it Derek Parfit? If you chop someone's brain in half and put it in two different bodies, and they both contain the personality of the person, who is me? And I'm like,
okay, but people do actually have car accidents in which the parts of the two halves of their brain are severed, and they function in some ways and completely not in others.
Yeah.
And we can study that as a neurological phenomenon rather than as a psychological thought experiment.
Yeah.
Or a philosophical thought experiment.
I mean, that was a lot of my problems with it, which is, these are just scientific questions. They're not philosophical necessarily. And they're eliding a lot of our experience of the world, our culture, our place, our race, religion, sexuality, gender, all of these other kinds of things are
economic status.
Yeah. Class. And all of these things, I think, are much more... they create the boundaries around who we are more than these kind of sci-fi examples. And I grew very out of I just grew disillusioned with that kind of project. But I was thinking a lot that even though we grew up in very different situations, we both seem to have grown up in a very rational, thinking of things in a very rational way. Like, not reject, I mean, I didn't reject religion necessarily, but I had to discover it, that I never had faith, like things like that. Yeah. Seems like you grew up in a very, I don't know if it's because of your mother or because of being, witnessing the religion that she was in, that you had to be with her while she was there.
It's easy to reject Tibetan Buddhism as a child because Tibetan Buddhism is so preposterous and ridiculous for a Westerner. Mm-hmm. Who is not taking it as a metaphor. And children don't take things as metaphors, really. Does this blue demon with fire in his hair exist? No, that's silly. That was an easy question.
But would you... I mean, this is the thing, though. Like, I rejected anything non-rational as a child and even into adult. I mean, I think I really have to get over... But, like, I think you asked if... this might have been before we were recording, but you were like, oh, is your dog sitter... Could they take care of, if you look in the box that's on your wife's desk to see if there are any termites in there? And I immediately...
I didn't say that. I said, and this was during the recording, I said that you should put the box outside.
Yeah. And then my brain was
until you unpack it.
My brain was like, well, we have a cat sitter. And I don't know why I had to... My brain immediately was like snapped into this rational thing. And I
can't ask my dog sitter. I must ask my cat sitter. Yeah. Yes.
I cannot operate on this boy. He is my son. Yeah. It's that kind of thing. My brain has this rational, like, it's like truth first. And it's been a process of like, you don't have to... it's okay. You can kind of like... Stephen didn't need to know whether you have a dog or a cat sitter. All right, it didn't matter. It's the point was about, you might have termites. Get rid of that box. Get someone to get rid of that box. But
I say this as someone who did have bed bugs at one point, and you just have to freeze the box for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
To kill the eggs.
I had
And that's you can't get around it.
Yeah. No, I had them back in 2010, and it was a living hell. It was a month of just pure hell of of fumigating every week and cleaning everything. Yes. But the point is, like, this rational architecture is in my brain, and I think that's just there, and it's always going to be there, and I have to fight against some of it. And it seems like you also have some kind of rational architecture.
Until you're possessed by a demon, and then the demon will completely destroy that part of your personality. And you'll be shouting, "Your mother wears army boots in hell," or whatever it is. Oh, no, that's not what it is. But
yeah. But as a kid, I wanted there to be, I had a rich imagination. I think I said this at the beginning too. I live in my head a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And most of the world kind of like whooshes past. And the whatever dialectical ends of my own personality are this kind of like fighting between the rational and this like world of pure imagination in my head. And I'm curious if that is similar to the way that you grew up. Do you live in your head a lot, or is it very much the purely rational that your brain kind of marinates, whatever verb?
Sorry, I don't see those two as a contradiction.
They aren't. I set them up as a contradiction, but they really aren't.
Where can one live if not in one's head?
You could be a purely rational, you could be a person, and I don't think you are, just based on your music, but it could be that you are a purely rational person and you're like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write this song. I know what I want, what emotion I want to evoke in the audience, or I know what is inside me that I would like to get out, and I'm going to do this.
I never use either of those. I don't expect to provoke a particular emotion in the audience, and I never have anything inside me that can be expressed in song. I don't think song is a valid medium of self-expression.
What is it to you then? It's
a crossword puzzle that can make people laugh or cry, but I am not in the position to dictate which one.
So, okay. I think that's, a very nice way of trying to get at the way I'm fumbling towards. Where I'm very much a comedy math person.
Okay.
Where I know how a joke should work, and I know different ways a joke can work.
Put the surprise at the end.
Put the surprise at the end is your basic thing. But like rule of three, like things like that. I know, and I know a way of writing a character joke. I know if the character does this thing reliably, then I write something that is that is there, or I heighten this thing, or whatever. I kind of, and I know because I've been a funny person since childhood, I instinctually know how to do it, and it just kind of comes out of me.
It's like you're on the red team at a company that wants outrageous suggestions they're not actually going to follow, but that allow them to think outside of the usual routine.
Yes. My wife is very different. She says things that are not necessarily funny, and she makes them funny. There's something in her.
Chickens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something like that. There is something in her that she can turn it on. Like I can see it because I know her in her private life, and I can see her when she walks on stage, and it's a switch in her head or something.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just fumbling for metaphors.
Only when she's on stage.
Yeah, or you see it like around our parents. Uh-huh. You got to turn it on to keep everything pleasant.
Oh boy.
But that's what I'm saying. Like this kind of rational way of like looking at this stuff. There's some puzzle you said that you want to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the way things are. And I take that as like, I grew up in a very like rational Jewish household, mm-hmm. like where rationality was prized, where doing well in school was prized above everything else. Uh-huh. And so my brain just kind of formed in that direction, or was attracted to those kinds of things. And then I got good at doing those kinds of things.
Good.
Well, I mean, I guess the prompt, I'm really trying to figure out, like, is that similar? Is that a similar way? Like, if you were growing up, I guess the puzzle that I'm trying to figure out.
In my household, rational was a dirty word.
So was there something? I mean, was
and
it?
it's basically it was always preceded by hyper.
I mean,
Hyper rational.
is there a prurient kind of like feel to it then, where you're like, oh, well, this is forbidden in some way, so I'm more attracted to it, or was it? Again, we're doing irrational.
Forbidden by whom? I never cared what my mother was forbidding me. She didn't have any authority over me. She was a hippie. No one thinks of hippies as being authorities on anything. The whole hippie project undermines that whole paradigm. So if I called my mother anything, it was her first name. I didn't feel that I was forbidden to do anything.
Yeah.
And I felt more that I had to figure out what I should be forbidden to do. So I'm really, really good at setting up rules for myself to follow and following them.
Okay, so that makes more sense. There's, in some way, a response to the lack of structure, that you're building structure for yourself.
Yes.
I mean, is there to me? There's some pleasure. There's a lot, like Naomi, my wife. She makes fun of me because I'll sit there writing and I'll laugh at a joke that I've written because it did the thing I wanted it to do. It surprised me, and therefore I found it to be a good good piece of writing.
Yeah, I do that to myself. I sit around in bars writing, and if I do something I think is funny, I will laugh out loud, and hopefully not too loud.
Yeah, I've given up on that. There was a point when I moved to New York where I was just like, if I'm gonna laugh, I'm gonna laugh, and as long as I'm not too disruptive.
Yeah, you're at work. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So there's this kind of so there's a pleasure in the rationality then.
Certainly not a displeasure. Sure. I mean, it's not a hot pleasure, a cool pleasure. Sure.
It might. I mean, again, I'm just projecting my own.
I prefer to read H.G. Wells or Jules Verne over Anne McCaffrey.
Yeah, there is pleasure in precision, and for me, it is not hot, not like passion, but it is definitely a closer to that than a cool.
Right. I understand that there is such a thing as a passion for precision, and I don't think I share it. He says, gesturing around his catastrophic room, which within a week will not be a catastrophic room.
I mean, I was thinking,
there's a pleasure in tidying up. There's a pleasure in getting rid of stuff. There's a pleasure in ordering things.
Yeah.
In sensible ways.
Yeah.
I suppose there would probably also be a pleasure in taking the 1,500 books in this room and sorting them by color rather than by author, as they would be if they were behind the desk at the Strand, say.
Yeah. I can't do that. I need it to be alphabetical by author and by subject if it's
subject
nonfiction.
For nonfiction, yes.
Yeah.
That same system, yes.
I can't do it otherwise. But that's what I'm saying. In some way, I can't. There's some level of this rationality that I grew up in that I can't escape. I don't know if I want to escape it, but I just that I have to make peace with, I suppose.
And biographies and monographs would be by subject. the Warhol shelf definitely should be together. I have to figure out whether I'm going to have plays under fiction or separate.
I would do separate. I would have it before or after fiction.
Yeah. I have so many of my books are in storage because of the insect menace that I'm not sure how many plays I have here, so it might only be a shelf, in which case maybe I'll just stick it in with fiction.
I mean, the worst for me was in moving from New York to Los Angeles, I had to keep a bunch of my books back here. I was only able to take like 2 shelves worth with me.
Because we moved into a Volkswagen Bug?
We moved into it's just not big enough for, I had a whole wall full of books.
Yeah.
And
that's how New Yorkers keep out the neighbors.
It's
soundproofing. Can't live without it.
To me, my brain, the books are an extension of my brain.
Sure.
And I mean, LA it feels like a very dumb town anyway. I mean, having been there for about 2.5 years.
Well, I was there for 6 years, and I think it's in some ways a smarter town than this one. And
Interesting.
so anyway, I used to keep fiction and theater in my New York apartment, and nonfiction in L.A. Nonfiction and cinema books in L.A. And that reflected the different headspaces that I had for my two different places, I guess.
Interesting.
My studio was in L.A., but really my best writing room was here. I just went to L.A., and my manager, Claudia, predicted that when I got back, I would announce that I wanted to move back to L.A. And I said, well, haha, I'm not going to wait to get back before announcing that I want to move back to L.A. I don't know that I want to be bi-coastal again, but I am, in fact, thinking of moving back to L.A.
Is there something about the city that spoke to you? Or is it just work?
Well, I went to parties at people's houses. Houses. They have houses.
My problem with, yes, I do like I like this fact that people have space.
It's like on television.
Yeah.
They have more than one room.
It's
Each of them has more than one room.
we find ourselves suffocated by the business out there. There's no escape in some way, and that's the problem that we have. We feel like there's no escape, at least, and maybe it's also that we work together sometimes, and so even in our house, it's difficult to escape.
I don't know. What's so awful about the film industry that you need to escape it?
The business part. I mean, I love creating things. It's the business. I found that out there that it's 95% business, 5% creative.
Okay, because it's an industry.
Right. I was naive. I'll cop to this. I was very naive about what the. I come from. I didn't even think it was a possibility. I come from middle class Pennsylvania suburb. I didn't think I could do any of this. It never even occurred to me until much later in my life that I could do any of this.
Well, you learn as you go along. Don't work for Disney on spec, for example. There are certain rules in show business.
Yeah, but I had been ignorant
They're
of
not
business.
terrible rules. You just have to find out what they are.
I mean, are you comfortable with the idea of business? It's not commerce. I'm not like talking about like commodifying the things you make, which is like what you have to do in the world. But like the idea of just business itself, there's something I'm very uncomfortable with that I can't seem to reconcile. The sociopathy of it really is discordant with my brain.
Well, people hate the phrase "a rising tide lifts all boats," but there's so much less poverty in the world than there was before free trade agreements. Mm-hmm. I'm really all in favor of letting people transact their business between each other, and I am comfortable with a certain level of commodification of my work, and when I get uncomfortable with it, I sever that relationship. Mm-hmm. So I feel that this is something that can be surfed, and it doesn't always turn out great, but it's much better than trying to do it outside of a commodity system.
Yeah.
I started out outside of a commodity system with hand-colored tape cassettes and a complete amateur feel, and that isn't really what I was trying to say.
I mean, you said you were writing songs since you were 7. I mean, at what point do you think...
I think actually it would be earlier, but 7 is when I learned to play guitar and piano. So what I had written down on a piece of legal paper,
yeah,
I could then play and sing rather than just sing.
I mean, 2 questions. Is there something that sparks a desire to... I made cartoons when I was a kid. Uh-huh. And it was, again, it was like I had something in my head. I lived in my head. I had this world in my head that I was trying to get onto the paper. I was just like, it was a compulsion almost. And it's to adulthood now. It's the same thing. If like I don't write for a while, then I get all jittery and weird, and I have to get this shit from my head out onto the page to kind of just like be okay. Is there something like that? Like what is the thing that's compelling you as a child to write? I mean, if you know, or is it just like, well, I like.
For me, it was an offshoot of my drawing, which has completely disappeared. I never draw now. I don't feel any need to. Well, I doodle, but that's it.
And then the other the second part of that was like, at what point are you like, well, I want to do this? I don't know about a career, but like, I want to make albums. I want to play music for quote unquote for real.
At no point.
At no point?
I have never made that decision. I was a film student. I thought I was going to be a filmmaker. And I have fallen into music because I'm better at it than I was as an art school filmmaker.
I mean, what led you to film then? I mean, if you're like, I thought I was going to be a philosophy professor. I thought I was going to be a physicist, then a philosophy professor. Yeah. And I find, again, that excavation process is like, no, you want to write, you want to perform. What was the...
There's probably a through line if you look for it.
Yes. But I mean, in terms
or
of...
you could probably invent a through line if you look for it.
In terms of like wanting to make film, was it, you said you were better at music than that, but you want, like, what was in you that you're like, well, I want to make film? Was there some...
I wanted to join the conversation. You know, I wanted to be Fassbender, basically. And I pretty much am, but without the visuals. I have, like, Fassbender or Orson Welles, their filmmaking approach was essentially the same as having a band.
Yeah.
They had a repertory company that did both theater and film. They worked with the same people all the time. And they, in both cases, they played these people off of each other in creative ways that helped them not to have all of their own ideas. I could have all of my own ideas, but then things would start sounding too similar. So I like to, I guess it's too Warholian to say play people off each other, but to allow people to behave in Newtonian ways, like billiard balls that create designs that I wouldn't have thought of.
Yes. I 100% understand that. It's
So I've displaced that from film to music, but I actually do that in theater, in my theater work. Mm-hmm. I like to work with the same people. I've done 3 shows with the same director, 3 shows with the same writer, not the same 3 shows. I believe in the having a band approach to same thing as having a repertory company. Working with the same people again and again with slight changes is a productive way of having a life.
Yeah.
Especially a writer's life where the writing itself is done in, quote, solitude, unquote, in the corner of a gay bar, in my case. And I really am in the corner. That's an important part. It's always the same corner. It's irritating to me when I can't find a stool to sit in my corner. And the routine is very important to my being able to make variations in other things.
Yes. Yeah. I'm exactly the same way. Yeah. I really feel where you're coming from, or it resonates with me.
Yeah. In order to vary the artistic routine, I think it's good to keep to the physical routine.
Yeah.
Which is really hard as an artist. You have to make your own routines. You have to invent your own routines and stick to them. But like I said, I'm as an only child of an aberrant hippie mother, I am pretty good at making rules and sticking to them.
Yeah.
Or I would have starved to death.
Yeah. I mean, at what point do you? We're right at the end, but I'm just curious. At what point do you decide to? I assume you could have stayed and cared for your mom for a long time. Was it after the Epstein bar kind of thing where you felt you could leave and go study film, or
I had already left. I was in college at that point, and I had to come back from recording school in New York because I couldn't really walk up and down stairs. So that was a temporary step back. But yeah, I had already left for New York, and quickly I went back as soon as I could.
Mm-hmm. I mean, was it difficult to leave that first time?
No, I just went off to NYU the first time. It was fine. And here I am back at NYU. My building is practically a dorm.
Yeah. I still, this is when I wanted to move to New York, this is the dream for me. Like, this apartment is specifically like what I had in my head.
Studio apartment full of books.
Yeah.
Yeah. Note that it doesn't contain a recording studio. I don't know how to live without a recording studio, and currently I can't get to mine, which is in upstate, in my house there. So I'm thinking maybe I'd go back to LA, I consolidate a bit, I have a small house. I used to have a small house in LA, and everything magically fit into it. And if it doesn't fit, there's such a thing as storage units. But in LA, houses have attics.
They have attics. They have pools there.
Right. You can just empty the pool, cover it over, and you have a library. A swimming pool library.
That's actually, I know you're just kidding, but in my head I was just like, that's actually not a bad, that's a kind of a cool idea of
not kidding at all. I don't like pools, so that's what I would do if I had a pool.
But thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. I hope
Thank you for talking to me. I'm sorry the house is such a mess.
It really is.
It's only a temporary mess.
How do you feel? Good, bad, medium about our talk?
Oh, good.
Okay.
Good. I'm really, really pretty much the same in personal life as in professional life. Note that I am not performative at all. So bad at remembering that I'm supposed to be trying to impress people, because I kind of don't care if I'm impressing people.
No, again, that really resonates with me. So thank you again, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.